So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for meeting with me today for the Pineapple Support talk on the magic of intimacy. And just a little introduction of who I am. My name is Danny Santos. I'd like to just start by blessing the space as I am practicing with shamanism and other things. So if you're listening, whether now in real time or later, I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. I'm just going to begin here with a prayer. Aho, Great Spirit, Grand Mystery. This is your child, Danny, and I'm here today with your children of the Pineapple Support Group. And as we are joined together, we call upon the beings that stand in the highest love, light, and abundance that the universe has to offer. Mother, Father, God, divine universe, divine deities, angels, spirit guides, archangels, and ancestors, please surround this group in a beautiful golden crystal circle that does resonate and vibrate in the highest light, love, light, and abundance that the universe has to offer. And may no energies, entities, spirits, or vibrations be able to permeate this circle, but instead may those lower frequencies be moved out of the darkness into the light and be delivered from evil. I also request to open up everyone's mind, body, heart, soul, and spirit to bring everyone's chakra systems into balance and alignment, and to bring forth the magic of intimacy as I've planned it for this group today. Amen. Okay, so as an introduction, I'd just like to start by introducing myself. My name is Danny Santos. I'm a professional astrologer, spiritual life coach, and ayahuasca shaman in training. I've been studying astrology for the last 18 years. So the lineage of ayahuasca shamanism that I'm studying through is called the Shipibo tribe, and it is a Peruvian tribe, one of the oldest ayahuasca traditions in the world. So I'm planning on going to Peru to study with my teacher's teacher sometime in the next year or so. I've sat in 22 ayahuasca ceremonies over the last 3 years and plan on heading to Peru, like I said, in the next year or two. I have a full practice as a spiritual life coach using techniques such as astrology, tarot, Reiki, sound healing, past life regression, and guided visualizations. I'm currently getting certified as a breathwork instructor, and I work with individuals and couples to increase things like intimacy, vulnerability, sexuality, and also self-actualization. My ultimate vision is to create a center for healing where I offer ayahuasca and other healing retreats with full integration therapy before, during, and after in order to help heal the world. And so today's magic that I'm going to be bringing forward is called the magic of intimacy. So intimacy, a very interesting idea. Intimacy to me can mean many things, and I'm sure as it can mean to you as well. But if we look at the Oxford Dictionary definition of intimacy, it's the idea of close familiarity or friendship or closeness. So connection. Another definition that the dictionary offered was an intimate act, especially sexual intercourse. So this idea of intimacy falling between, closeness or physicality, I'd like to actually challenge some of those notions today. So in order to just kind of break the ice on this idea of intimacy, I'd like to talk about the archetype of Eros. So Eros energy. And there's a little card here that goes with the Eros. We have a pair of lips with a diamond jewel in the center of it. So Eros, also known as love, as desire, eroticism, and sensuality. And what it says here is, though Eros can be depicted as unbridled sexuality and eroticism, a more contemplative understanding of this archetypal energy leads us to the root of desire itself. What do we long for? Why are we awakened by love? What makes us hesitate in the face of intimacy? Eros reconnects us with the primal longing to merge with another human being, to merge with nature, music, art, plants, food, or anything that we perceive that we are separate from. But Eros allows us to momentarily unite. Our heart embraces otherness, and in doing so, we further understand our own. Our life force awakens. This energy reveals an inevitable initiation into love's labyrinth. You may find yourself swirling in a new territory of desire and sensuality. Explore the labyrinth with a curious and honest heart. And remember, though the way is circuitous, you are always being led towards its center. So Plato reminds us that Eros can be experienced as platonic love. It is activated when we witness beauty and truth in the world and when our barriers soften. The Hindu goddess Lalita, or she who plays, can help activate Eros energy. She is also known as Kameshvari, the Empress of Desire. So when Eros energy is working properly in our own lives, it's passion, playfulness, and sexual health. But when we're not working in alignment with this energy, it is madness, projection, or obsession. To go deeper, you can read love sonnets or poems. Ellen Bass has a story called The Basket of Figs, which has a beautiful touch on eroticism and sensuality. And anything that just kind of gets you in the romantic setting, whether it's watching romantic movies or these kinds of things. But some of the questions that we're going to be looking at today is, where does eroticism and intimacy live in the body? Who can we experience intimacy with? Well, I want to answer that second question with intimacy is something that can be experienced with anybody. The idea of, hello, thank you for joining us. The idea that intimacy can be experienced with anyone, we have to recognize that intimacy comes from within. The ability to connect with somebody else really starts inwardly. Intimacy can also be experienced with a partner, and it can be experienced with multiple partners, but you don't need to be having sex in order to be experiencing intimacy. And so a big part of my work, as I mentioned prior, was as an astrologer and a spiritual life coach. I want to help people see themselves more clearly. So the golden meaning of my practice behind everything that I do, every way that I work with someone, is that we can only meet others as deeply as we've met ourselves. This idea that everybody that we meet is here to teach us something or to heal us, but because they're a mirror, so it goes both ways. The idea that we can only meet others as deeply as we've met ourselves is the cornerstone of all intimacy. So without being connected to yourself, you can't explore deeper intimacy with another. There are some occasions where we've got two people coming together and they're on the search for deeper intimacy together. Maybe their vibrational frequencies meet in the middle and they're able to go deeper, but it can't really be done. You have to do that work on yourself first or meet somebody on an equal playing field to go deeper together. So a major part of my work with ayahuasca shamanism is to help myself connect more deeply inward so that I can connect deeper with my clients and people in my personal life as well. The study of astrology and ayahuasca has also helped me uncover this idea, which I'm starting to develop, called the medicine. So we can think about like the secret, that's the law of attraction, or the gift, or these different things that have been brought into the mainstream pop culture. So what I would like to bring is this concept of the medicine. And the medicine is a tool that I want to use for helping people achieve self-actualization and self-spiritual enlightenment. And it is the best tool to use in order to establish intimacy. So the concept of the medicine is that, like I said, we can only meet others as deeply as we've met ourselves, but every single person that we meet is a form of medicine. And rather than getting angry at other people and saying like, well, why is this person doing this to me? Or what is my shortcoming that's causing this to happen to me? Instead, the concept of the medicine is to realize that we need to establish our own boundaries. We need to have our own integrity. We need to stand in our strength so that when we're in a situation that we're unhappy with, we can say, okay, well, how am I falling short of myself? What part of myself am I rejecting or denying that's really necessary in order to establish deeper intimacy with myself? because oftentimes we'll see people in toxic situations or where there's little to no intimacy in a relationship, and they might feel as though they're suffering. But if we have true self-awareness, if we keep our side of the street clean, as I like to say it, you have emotional recognition to meet yourself deep enough to say, I'm not happy and I'm willing to change my circumstances. So if we begin to take personal accountability for everything that we do, it's what heals us, not only as a world, not only as a planet, but in our sexuality too. So there's a woman named Dr. Helene Brenner, and she is the author, she's a PhD and author of a book titled, I Know I'm in There Somewhere, A Woman's Guide to Finding Her Inner Voice and Living a Life of Authenticity. Now, the reason I'm bringing Dr. Brenner into this is because she has established the 4 different types of intimacy, and I'd like to expound on her theories today. So I will define what she brings in as the 4 different kinds of intimacy, but then also talk about how these kinds of intimacies can be destroyed, how they can be strengthened or fostered, and then how we can use these types of intimacy in our sex lives and in our personal relationships. So, and I've even added a 5th one as well that she doesn't really talk about, but I think it was kind of necessary. So when we look at the first kind of intimacy that she explains, it would be known as emotional intimacy. So as an astrologer, I have to bring the elements into play here. I think emotional intimacy is responsible for passion and fire energy. It's kind of like the zodiac signs Sagittarius, Leo, and Aries. The place where emotional intimacy lives in the body is the throat chakra and the solar plexus chakra. So communication and self-worth. And I do believe all forms of intimacy live in the heart as well. So that's just an overarching thing. Now we're just getting to the nitty gritty for each one. So when we think about emotional intimacy, what this is defined as, according to Dr. Brenner, it's cultivating a sense of closeness and relating to how you and your partner feel via empathy, respect, communication. Are you on the same page as your partner? That's a major part of this concept, the emotional intimacy. So it's really feeling safe and having a container where your emotions can be shared. To bolster emotional intimacy, Dr. Brenner recommends to break it down in 3 different ways. So the first one is to slow it down. Second one is keep it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate things. And then also share what's difficult to say. If we have true emotional intimacy, there's a quote by Jim Morrison where he says, well, a friend is somebody who gives us complete permission to be ourselves. I believe this is true for emotional intimacy as well. You want to have a partner or a person in your life who's giving you total permission to be yourself. If we want to bolster emotional intimacy, so we mentioned breaking it down in those 3 ways, but also process what you're going to say before you speak, because you need to know exactly what you feel before you're bringing it to your partner, or if you're having a mutual conversation. These are effective ways to do it rather than, pile drive and projecting onto your partner. Because as we know, you can only meet others as deeply as you've met yourself. Well, projection is one of the fastest ways to kill any form of intimacy. So when you do speak, it's important to also contextualize your emotions. In my own practice, I tell my clients, emotional recognition is one of the greatest skills that we can have. So as things come up for us, to be able to discern what am I feeling and then label it so that you can bring it to a partner, a friend, or even yourself. If we look further, Dr. Brenner says, take the risk not to protect yourself. You can't simultaneously protect yourself and be emotionally intimate. Let your heart be seen. So this is an incredibly important thing. Intimacy does come with a risk. In order to let somebody else see you fully, there is the opportunity that you could be rejected, you could feel unreceived by somebody else. But it's important for us to keep in mind that if you can't be fully yourself or show up in full integrity, being full and undivided, then it's difficult to be able to connect with people in a more intimate way. So some of the ways that I'd like to expound upon the emotional intimacy sector is thinking about how it's destroyed, first of all. What's the biggest thing to kill emotional intimacy? In my opinion, this would be a lack of self-worth, believing that you are not deserving of receiving intimacy. In spirituality, we call this the solar plexus chakra. So it's located 3 inches above the belly button. And this is where self-worth, self-love, self-esteem, and boundaries all live within the body. It is our solar energy, our ego. So you have to have a strong enough ego to be able to talk to people around you about what you have, what you're feeling. The ego is oftentimes seen as a negative connotation, but I'd like to reframe this as a neutral connotation. Because if we love ourselves, if we are able to hold ourselves, move away from codependency, and be self-contained, it will improve our relationships over time. The other thing is rejection. As I mentioned before, this is one of the biggest things to lead to emotional intimacy landscape of the desert, where things dry out. So you have to be courageous enough to speak your authentic truth. You have to be willing, in the face of adversity, in the face of your own rejecting yourself or somebody else rejecting you, to show up as a whole and undivided person. That is just the pure definition of integrity. Now, when we think about how to strengthen emotional intimacy, we have to be willing to sustain the discomfort of others. So this is another thing that I talk about in my practice all the time. When you're speaking your truth, when you're laying down your boundaries, when you are being authentically yourself, it can be uncomfortable to perceive, well, how is the other person going to feel about this? How is this going to affect the relationship if I come forward and speak the truth? But this is where accountability comes into hand. So in order to have deeper intimacy emotionally, we also have to have personal accountability. So this idea of integrity and being whole and undivided, well, not only are you sustaining the discomfort of the other person, but you can also hear the response and the emotions of the other person as well. You're able to literally sustain the discomfort of others because their discomfort and you being able to hold that container increases intimacy. This is where we get couples who can have hard conversations. They can meet each other in a more challenging battlefield, the battlefield of love, if you will. And the idea also of keeping your side of the street clean, as I mentioned before, because it ensures that we're living our most profound sense of self. So if you're having a problem with someone in a relationship, what I said earlier about the medicine, it's being able to take accountability. Well, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody who's unavailable. You've been together for 5 years, and you're starting to say, well, if only they would leave their wife or their husband. But instead, if we say, well, why am I choosing this situation? Am I blocking myself from true intimacy by picking somebody who's unavailable rather than pointing the fingers at somebody else? And that way of thinking can be used to strengthen our point of view at all times. We can always reflect on ourselves, because if you think this way, I guarantee it'll make you a better person and a stronger person. So, ways to foster emotional intimacy in a sexual relationship. Well, talk to your partner about what you're feeling and be vulnerable about what your traumas are. If you do this, then you and your partner can begin to create a safe container to explore sexual avenues to heal those traumas. So this idea comes from the concept that you can turn your pain into pleasure. Sometimes when people suffer from physical abuse, the thing that they're going to want to run to the most is, shying away from any kind of intense physicality in the bedroom. But for others, we can see that doing acts such as BDSM can actually be quite healing or quite kinky. It can be something that really helps transform that pain into something that you have control of or are in touch with. Another way of increasing emotional intimacy with a partner sexually would be to exchange erotic letters at the beginning of the day, and then both of you read them separately, maybe while you're on your lunch break or while you're apart. and then coming back together at the end of the day and then reading the letters back to each other. So, and this doesn't just have to be erotic letters. These can be letters written out of love, letters written out of frustration. But it's an interesting practice to write the letter on your own time, exchange it, have time to marinate it, and then reading the other person's letter back to them. So you're getting all points of view. This strengthens emotional intimacy. And if it's an erotic letter, then you can kind of go over the kinds of things that it made you feel and just sharing that emotional connection with a partner. Some other ways that we can establish further emotional intimacy would be learning about a partner's desires and taking turns focusing on one partner's pleasures at a time. So depending on the frequency of sexual encounters, let's say one encounter, you're going to focus solely on your other partner. And what is their number one thing? What is their kink? What is their fetish? Or what is their epitome of pleasure? And just making it solely about them. Then in the next encounter, having it flipped on you and being able to receive this pleasure. And same thing. And what happens here is it starts bringing out what emotions are attached to giving and receiving. How can we expound ourselves on being able to be in these dynamics of, kind of like love languages, that physical touch, quality time, acts of service, giving and receiving. How are we able to sustain that? And do you have discomfort around receiving? Do you have discomfort around giving? It's a way to increase that emotional intimacy, to understand what's going on. Are there other emotional dynamics at play? Because, as I mentioned before, not being able to receive might come down to the idea of worthiness. And we know emotional intimacy comes down to worthiness, and it is destroyed by rejection. We can also think about this idea of listening to a partner's thoughts and concerns and holding space for their emotions. So similar to what I said before about talking to your partner about their feelings, but really treating their thoughts and feelings as something sacred and seeing it as something where, okay, we can actually start to fold these things in. If one partner is feeling rejected or feeling tight about money or, these kinds of things, this is stuff that needs to be talked about. And we can, like I said, fold this into the sexual dynamic and try to find other ways to blow off the steam. So that is kind of the, like I said, the fire energy. It's the passion, it's the emotional. It's where we're finding a lot of those feelings-based things. Now, the next form of intimacy that I'd like to unpack is what I call mental intimacy. So, or actually what Dr. Brenner calls it, but what I would like to theorize on it is this is how air signs in the zodiac, maybe like Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra experience intimacy. This comes from the third eye chakra in spirituality. So this is the center of the body that has to do with psychic vision, thoughtfulness, intelligence, but then also the throat chakra, same as the emotional intimacy. There are things about communication, being able to have conversation, these sorts of things, but it's rather than coming from an emotional place, it's coming from a more cerebral place. So consider mental intimacy as a meeting of the minds. It's this idea of how do we satisfy, challenge, or stimulate each other. Dr. Brenner says, for some people, this is great wit and repartee. They love bouncing off each other and challenging each other. She continues to say that mental intimacy can also be great talks about movies or a play you saw, or the career you both are in, or the causes that matter to you. Make sure you spend significant amounts of time engaging together in what stimulates you mentally, she continues. And a little playful competition doesn't hurt. So try playing board games against each other as long as you're fairly evenly matched. So I think this is a really good definition of how we can experience mental intimacy with somebody else. And I'd like to expound on Dr. Brenner's theory of mental intimacy by talking about how this can be destroyed, how it can be built, and then how we can foster it in a sexual relationship. So mental intimacy is destroyed by judgmental thoughts, being overly judgmental, thinking you know it all, and not being curious about another way the other way a person sees something. So a good example of this would be if we had maybe an atheist and a member of the Westboro Baptist Church up against each other. Well, they're not going to be able to have the same mental kind of energy because they fundamentally believe different things. And this would also be our following intimacy, spiritual intimacy. But I think especially from the atheist point of view, because they don't have a spiritual center a lot of the time. Atheists just believe in nothing other than reality and science. So what this does is it really puts a blocker between two people being able to experience mental intimacy. Whereas maybe you have one person who is, a scholar and maybe not maybe more agnostic versus somebody who's a Buddhist and studying a spiritual path. They can still have deep mental stimulating conversations because inherently their thoughts and styles aren't necessarily overlapping each other or rejecting each other. But mental intimacy is destroyed when you are unable to see things from another person's point of view. Now, this can also be, we can have two partners that have maybe the same religion or maybe the same philosophy, but if they're in an argument and not being able to see something from the other's point of view, this destroys mental intimacy. I believe it was Plato who said it takes a wise man to be able to see the point of view of something that he doesn't agree with or believe in, and still be able to entertain the idea. So this is really mental intimacy, to be able to explore a way of thinking that might not be your own, or to be able to be challenged in it. Other signs of blocked mental intimacy would include the idea of being overly depressed, where you're just feeling heavy all the time, having a sense of anxiety, and strong feelings of sadness, because these things just clog the mind up instantly, and the heart. And we said, the heart goes for all of these forms of intimacy, but having an underactive imagination could also be a part of lacking mental intimacy. But if we want to build or strengthen mental intimacy in a relationship, some of the tips that I have would be in engaging activities in which both partners are equally skilled, similar to what Dr. Brenner said, like a board game, or trying a new activity together for the first time. So this could be done, maybe both partners have never gone skydiving or rock climbing, or even something as simple as, going to an arcade that neither has ever been to before. The idea of novelty and variety is very mentally stimulating and one of the most important tools to keeping two people interested in each other for the long run. Because as things are new, that newness, that's mentally stimulating. So other things that can be done to continue to foster mental intimacy would be catching your partner off guard in a fun way. So an example that I put here was leaving a trail of rose petals in your house that's leading to your partner to a different part of the house that they wouldn't normally go to for some kind of surprise. This could be, having a picnic set up in a different room, having a sexual encounter staged for you and your partner, really leaving room to create intimacy in a mental way, but it's unexpected. It's tickling the mind. It really, a sense of dopamine and excitement comes along with it. Some other ideas would be engaging conversations that challenge both parties without leading to an argument. Because, as we know, judgmental thinking or thinking that you know it all will oftentimes lead to the depletion of mental intimacy. So we want to continue to inspire with curiosity, being open-minded, being receptive to our partner and what they have to think and share that way. So we can also say theorizing over topics that both parties have an interest in. For me, I'm a professional astrologer. So if I'm dating somebody who also knows astrology and they see it like a little differently than I do, that's fun. That keeps me going. So a good way to meet yourself deeper in your mental intimacy is to know, well, what are you interested in? And what kind of topics do you like to talk about? What piques your interest? Sharing taste in movies and television and plays is a huge, huge form of mental intimacy. because then you can talk about like, oh yeah, did you see that show? And can you believe this character did that? And these kinds of things. But if you've got one partner who loves TV and one who doesn't watch it at all, they're going to have to find ways around this for other forms of mental intimacy. So let's talk about ways to foster intellectual or mental intimacy in a sexual relationship. We mentioned that one tip of setting up the rose petals and surprising a partner with either a picnic or a sexual encounter in a room in the house where they wouldn't normally expect it. But some other ideas would be distracting one partner with a mental exercise while performing a sexual act on them. So I experienced this once when I was having a hookup with a guy. We had seen each other a few times. And what he did was he said to me, I want you to say the alphabet backwards. And I was like, what? And he said, for every time I thrust into you, if you get the letter right, I'll thrust again. So I was like, okay. And, you start Z, Y, X, W, V. Then at a certain point, it starts getting harder and harder. And it kept me so mentally stimulated. I have never experienced something like that in my life. It was a very fascinating thing because he not only had me physically, but he had my mind too. And what starts off as an experiment in stretching your mind turns into this fun and very quirky experience of experiencing sex and mental energy back and forth. So I would absolutely recommend some sort of exercise like this. Playing erotic board games with different prompts can also be a huge way of experiencing mental intimacy. Things like strip poker, other novelty games, these kinds of things. Now, there's one concept of the all-day foreplay where both partners can be texting each other all day and talking about the kinds of things they want to do to each other. Maybe one partner's looking up new things that they want to try and texting it to the other partner. And this is a way of kind of getting, you're rearing up while you're at work or out. And then by the time you finally get together at the end of the day, it's offering the opportunity to cathartically release all of the mental energy that you've been pent up with the entire day. So, and then similar to the rose petals, we have surprising a partner with a completely new sexual activity, a new sexual outfit or piece of lingerie, a different location, a new style of role play, and a new toy. These can all be ways to bring out a little bit more mental stimulation in the bedroom. So the next area of intimacy that I'd like to talk about or introduce is spiritual intimacy. And this would come from the water signs of the zodiac, so similar to Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. And this would be ruled by the sacral chakra. It is the element of water. So, excuse me. We can think of this, this one as a bit tricky, according to Dr. Brenner, because two people in a couple or friendship might not be in touch with their spirituality in the same way. So spirituality can take many different forms of expression, whether it's a code of values and ethics, morals, or your religious or spiritual beliefs. So Dr. Brenner elaborates on this by saying, if your partner is not spiritually inclined, find spiritual intimacy by expressing to your partner what your spirituality means to you and how it makes you a better person or gives meaning to your life. So one example of this would be, me talking about how astrology and ayahuasca shamanism means something to my life, and then having a partner who's willing to entertain or indulge in those ideas or activities as well. So Dr. Brenner goes on to say you can boost spiritual intimacy with your partner by connecting in a poignant or quiet moment. So if you are having a moment that feels spiritual to you with your partner, share your joy in the spiritual meaning you get from that moment. She continues to say that then look for the ways that your partner expresses deep spirituality through the actions they do and the values they live by. So this isn't just about spirituality, spiritual beliefs. This would go into the category of compatibility of, do me and my partner have a complementary philosophical belief about life? Do we have a vision of seeing life and the world in a way where we're trying to build or get the same things out of our life? Deep spiritual intimacy comes from, can I see my life with this person going forward? They say that true intimacy is not two people staring into each other's eyes and getting lost, but it's two people standing side by side, looking outward into a future together. So let's see, let me just catch up where I was. Okay, so next I want to talk about how is spiritual intimacy destroyed. So my argument is that it would be destroyed through shame. And I'd like to bring in Brene Brown for anybody who's a Brene Brown fan, shout out. But Brene Brown defines shame as this idea where shame is I am bad. Whereas guilt is the idea that I did something bad. And Brene Brown says that she defines shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love or belonging. Because in our spiritual wellness, I do believe that it gives us a sense of purpose or belonging in our lives and in our worlds. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection, according to this definition from Brene Brown. I don't believe shame is helpful or productive, and I would agree with Brene Brown through this. I think that shame shuts down not just spiritual intimacy, although that's a huge part here, but all forms of intimacy. When we don't feel like we're worthy or we're good enough or that we inherently are bad, it makes it more difficult for us to connect with other people on a more profound level. So let's talk about some of the ways that spiritual intimacy can be created. So I do believe spiritual intimacy, this is me expounding on Dr. Brenner and a little bit of Brene Brown as well. But in my opinion, spiritual intimacy can be created through shared spiritual experiences. This could be a special ceremony or a trip to a spiritual location. So examples of this would be maybe doing a plant medicine ceremony with mushrooms or ayahuasca, having a marriage ceremony, obviously, or even an anniversary, whether you're married or not, everybody celebrates an anniversary. And the reason this is because having ceremony gives meaning to our lives. It's so important to our well-being. It's so important to our success as human beings, because without meaning in life, life can become dull. It's ritual, sacrament, and ceremony that gives purpose. Something as simple as a birthday party is a very powerful ceremony. Other things that we can do to increase spiritual intimacy with a partner would be meditating, sharing music that both partners like, and even planning a trip like taking a hot spring with your partner to a location that's unfamiliar to you both as an opportunity to connect deeper, try something a little different. Now, ways to foster spiritual intimacy in a sexual relationship, probably my most favorite form of intimacy would be eye gazing, prolonged eye contact, making love while looking in your partner's eyes, and also while in orgasm. Looking your partner in the eye during orgasm can be one of the most profound senses of intimacy. Other ways of doing intimacy in the spiritual setting would be lighting candles and setting a stage for a spiritual sexual experience. And of course, tantric sexuality. And I do want to recommend the book Urban Tantra for anybody who is interested in learning more about Tantra, because this is a great place to start. Now, let's get to probably the most obvious form of intimacy. When people hear the term intimacy, they oftentimes think of physical intimacy. So according to Dr. Brenner, physical intimacy is essentially about relaxing into it, joining in the flow of sex, sexuality, carnality, getting into the moment and sharing, giving, getting. It's about expressing what feels good. So it's about the connection and excitement of the act of sex, and giving and getting pleasure and closeness. Dr. Brenner also says, ask for what feels good, go for what feels good. So as I'd like to expound on her theory of physical intimacy, I do believe that physical intimacy would be destroyed through physical violence and also not feeling grounded in your body. if you're feeling overly mental or cerebral in your body. Uh, if we want to increase physical intimacy, one of my greatest tips always is if you have an overactive mind and you're going into sex and sexuality, try playing some music to ground yourself. Because if you're in the pure silence or in the intensity of the moment, you might get a little overwhelmed by the silence. So it helps sometimes to have a little background noise. Physical intimacy is also, it's just mainly fostered through the act of literally having sex, kissing, touching, making love, massage, exploring, like I said, the carnality of the human body. Another way to foster physical intimacy is to practice. Be willing to have mediocre sex, maintenance sex, when you and your partner aren't both fully in the mood. It's just doing it. It's just going for it. Because the only way that you're going to get better at sex with a partner, I mean, you can increase the other forms of intimacy, but you need to explore each other's bodies. You need to know, okay, where are the hidden buttons? What's the most sensitive part on my partner's body? Oftentimes, the physical act of starting to have sex needs to happen in order for some partners to even get turned on. So there are a lot of people out there who believe they have low sex drives, but it actually takes the act of literally being touched or beginning to engage in a sexual act that gets them to start going. And of course, learning the rhythm of your partner is another way to increase physical intimacy. So do they like to go slow, fast, variety, sensitive, make love, hardcore fucking, however it looks. It requires a sense of exploring and learning each other. It takes time. Ways to foster physical intimacy in a sexual relationship. Well, we can think of the act of sex itself is probably the most obvious way, but also massage, because this isn't necessarily, I mean, it's very sexual as it's coming with touch, but it's, if you massage without the intention of having sex immediately afterwards, this is incredibly intimate. Passionate kissing without leading to sex right away is also a huge way to do it. And taking time to be present in your body and present with your partner's body. Now, some other fun things that can be done to establish some physical intimacy in a deeper way could be using ice cubes or a heating and cooling lube to kind of heat up the body and then relax the body, as a way of extracting more physical sensation for that partner. And so those are the 4 ways that Dr. Brenner defines intimacy. And just as a quick review, emotional, which I believe goes with the fire energy or the passion side of life. Mental, which I believe goes with the air signs or the intelligence of life. Spiritual, the water sign. Spiritual, philosophical belief. Do we share the same picture of our lives? And then physical, the earth signs, the root chakra. It's what grounds us in reality. But I would like to offer a 5th form of intimacy. And this is what I'd like to call true intimacy. So this is my own theory. I think this goes with all signs of the zodiac. And it also goes to the heart chakra and what they call the crown chakra. This is self-actualization located at the top of the head. True intimacy to me would be defined as unconditional love. It is a connection to the universe and to your partner that transcends space and time. Love without boundaries due to a very deep and profound sense of trust, because the opposite of trust would be boundaries, and vice versa. The spiritual experience of being with your soulmate. And true intimacy is not something that everybody gets to experience in this lifetime. So in order to get closer to true intimacy, in one of my ayahuasca sessions, I actually had a vision of the 5 stages of finding true intimacy, also known as the 5 stages of falling in authentic love. And this came to me initially because it was established or shown to me in my ayahuasca training as a measuring tool to help love addicts move beyond disillusionment and fantasy. And as somebody who's had a lot of crazy relationships and a lot of crazy sexual experiences, love affairs, this sorts of things, I think that the 5 stages of true intimacy really can be useful to help establish it, and knowing when you're not jumping the gun and thinking that you're establishing intimacy, but instead it becomes faulty. This is where going too fast can take over. So the first stage of true intimacy is that it takes time. You can feel a connection with somebody, but the first 6 months are projection anyway. When we meet people, we oftentimes want to see, oh my God, this person is going to bring Shangri-La to me. They're going to help me experience and feel all of the things I've been missing in life. And time is number one on this list, because if you think that it's true intimacy from step one, maybe it's a true connection, maybe it's infatuation, but in order to confirm it, you need time, because it takes about 6 to 9 months to just start to get to know somebody, about 2 months to really know somebody, and then to know someone in and out, it takes about 5 years. Now, the next thing that this kind of goes with the last point, exposure. Sure, you can know somebody over a long period of time, but if you're not around them, if you don't see how they treat the person at the post office or the server at the restaurant, the grocer behind the gas station, talk to their family, talk to you, treat you when things go right or wrong, you want to make sure that you have exposure to this person before you are able to decipher whether or not it's true intimacy. The next point we have is mutual interest. So as somebody who, like I said, I've suffered from my own love addiction in the past, so to speak, you will only know if it's true intimacy if both parties express their interest. Otherwise, it's either projection or fantasy. Now, after mutual interest comes trust. Both parties have already identified that they are both interested. They both want to be in the relationship or around each other. And boundaries kind of come with mutual interest. We've got the boundaries, you're communicating, you're saying, okay, what am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? And then the opposite of boundaries, trust. It's learning the other person enough to be able to trust them. Because what's more intimate than trusting somebody else with your body, with your money, with your time? So the final form of true intimacy would be if that other person's willing to commit to you. So when we say true intimacy, it really means a partner who you're having a true soulmate connection with. The last point I'd like to talk about is eye contact. So in 2010 at the Museum of Modern Art, Marina Abramovich, who is a performance artist, engaged in an extended performance called The Artist is Present. The work was inspired by her belief that stretching the length of a performance beyond expectations serves to alter our perception of time and foster deeper engagement in the experience. So she did this over the course of 3 months. And she sat seated silently at a wooden table across from an empty chair, and she waited as people took turns sitting in the chair and locking eyes with her, an intimacy eye lock. Over the course of nearly 3 months, for 8 hours a day, she met the gaze of 1,000 strangers, many of whom were moved to tears simply by looking a stranger in the eye. Now, Marina Abramovich was quoted as saying, "Nobody could imagine that anybody would take time to sit and just engage in a mutual gaze with me." Abramovich explained it. In fact, the chair was always occupied, and there were always continuous lines of people waiting to sit in it. It was a complete surprise, this enormous need of humans to actually have contact. So the reason I bring this in is because on my birthday of this last year, the man that I had been seeing for the last 5 years came to my apartment to celebrate me. And when he came to my apartment, he was greeted with a setup very similar to Marina Abramovich's. So I had 2 chairs across from each other, and I set a timer for 11 minutes and invited him to sit opposite of me, where we just looked at each other. And I absolutely adored this experience, but he cried the entire time, profusely. And we have known each other for 5 years. We've been, engaged in a sexual and romantic relationship that whole time. So I do believe that eye contact can heal the world and transform people. And it's one of the best tools to start establishing deeper intimacy. And I also think it's an exorcism tool. It can remove other people's demons and bring light to the darkness. So some other just really quick tidbits before we wrap it up here, you guys, is there is a Harvard psychologist who found that couples who were deeply in love after several years looked each other in the eyes 75% more of the time while talking versus the 30 to 60% of the time average for couples, regular couples. Also, when people look at each other in group settings because they both find the same thing funny, this denotes a deep connection. You know, there's just this idea of like, oh, you got the same thing that I did as funny. And eye contact is a powerful stimulator of affection. So a study published in the Journal of Research and Personality, in which two opposite gender strangers were asked to gaze into each other's eyes for 2 minutes, found that this was enough for some cases to produce passionate feelings in each other. So much so that one of the couples even got married a year later. So this is similar to the 36 questions to fall in love, where couples ask each other 36 intimate questions over the course of a couple hours and then have to stare at each other for 4 minutes in total silence. So I just want to wrap up this talk today by thanking everybody who's either listening to this live or going to be listening back to this later. This is the magic of intimacy. These are the different ways in which we can explore intimacy within our minds, body, heart, souls, and spirits. And it's not something that's so far-fetched, but it certainly does require commitment. It does require time. And we need to see more intimacy in the world. In a world of social media where intimacy might be falling by the wayside, or we're not in each other's presence as much. So I just want to say thank you again. And I believe I was put on for a 50-minute slot, so I want to make sure
Yeah, you're perfect. That's brilliant. Thank you, Danny. One thing I would say, I've just been sat here and you mentioned one of your encounters where the guy had said to you, right, do the alphabet backwards.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, I just W. So I was like, please don't anyone ever do that to me, because it'll be the shortest hookup of my life.
Well,
However, I do like sexy getaways, but what I will do is I will be learning the alphabet backwards just in case.
oh my, well, the point was that it was so mentally stimulating and engaging that I kind of froze up because I couldn't think of the next letter. So I had to go back through it, and it was really powerful.
I can imagine. But there's actually a question here. If I just pull it up, it says, your concept seems like it's familiar with Bell Hook's notion of love as an action and the necessary components to hold it together. Was this work inspired her and Sharon's pursuit to better understand love and the self?
Well, I am a huge fan of Bell Hooks. I went to film school at USC, and we read her literature all the time, especially her work White and these sorts of things. I mainly drew from Brene Brown and Dr. Helene Brenner. So if it does happen to overlap with some Bell Hooks, I'm flattered, because I think she's fabulous. But there was no direct correlation or inspiration. However, I might bring that into a future talk now.
And we've just got another one that's just come up saying, this was brilliant. How to foster intimacy with the self. It's great. So if anyone's got any other queries or questions that they want to put forward, just quickly. In the meantime, Danny, how can people get hold of you directly if they wanted to contact you?
Sure. So just a little recap. I'm a professional astrologer, spiritual life coach, and ayahuasca shaman in training. So if you're interested in learning more about any of the things I do, you're welcome to email me directly at santosastrology@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Santos Crystal Visions, or you can find me on TikTok at Santos Crystal Visions. I just passed 15,000 followers on my TikTok page.
Woo, go
so
you.
I started about 5 weeks ago. So
that's great. That's great. Have you got anything new that's coming up that you'll be looking forward to doing yourself, or any other presentations, webinars, etc.?
No presentation or webinars right on the horizon now. I have my next level of ayahuasca shamanism training in October. Excellent. So I'm really hoping, a big part of my desire with this work is to offer that healing to people in the adult entertainment industry, people who are sex workers, people who have suffered from sexual assault, and people who have suffered from human trafficking. So that's the cornerstone of my work, is I want to heal the sexual wound of the world.
Well, hopefully you've got a few new followers now, because, you know, it's just so informative. There's so many different aspects to gauge and to take on board, isn't there? You know, some people Like I've been guilty of it before, just running in and being sort of mainly lust inspired, and then maybe not thinking about what I should be thinking and doing.
Yeah.
But there's definitely things that I've taken down notes on. So,
Well, fabulous. And I also want to say there's nothing wrong with being a little lusty from time to time. It's just
exactly.
if you're looking for partnership or even establishing intimacy with many people, I didn't quite get to this, but you can have a little bit of the trickster in you. And that's somebody who's able to engage in something spicy and hot and then being able to leave the energy behind.
I'd love to be able to do that. Unfortunately, once I'm hot, I just go. So
You and me both.
thank you so much for your time again.